That was the famous New England Patriots quarterback Tom Brady after he won his first 3 Super Bowls. Does he seem fulfilled there? No. But he's on top of the world. He's the most eligible bachelor in America. He's the greatest at his profession. Yet asked how he feels about it all, he says, man, there's got to be more than this. That's the central message of the entire book of Ecclesiastes that we're going to see. That while God has given us many things in this life to enjoy, if He's not in the picture, if Jesus is not at the center, no matter how much success we have, a day will come where we'll look up and say, man, there's got to be more than this, right? Here's the take-home message. Without God, all is vanity. Without God at the center of our lives in the person of Jesus Christ, everything's meaningless. Everything's empty. We're going to talk a lot about this word vanity, and it might not be a word in your normal vocabulary, but it's very important for understanding the book of Ecclesiastes. So let's begin by looking at a biblical definition of vanity. This is the Hebrew word hevel, and it's used both literally and metaphorically in the Old Testament. And when it's used literally, it's used to describe a wind, breath, mist, or vapor, which makes sense of its metaphorical use, which means something that is empty, futile, fleeting, or elusive. And so it's a rich word. It's got a lot of nuance. And Solomon, the author of Ecclesiastes, is going to use it in all different types of ways. And so as I was preparing for this series, I was just going through and looking at some of the common meanings or uses of this word as Solomon uses it. And here's the first one. Solomon will use this to describe something that is futility. He'll use this phrase that says that something is a striving after the wind. And so we know there's a lot of windy days in Iowa, and if I walked outside of the church one day when I was working and it's windy, and I said, man, I'm going to chase after the wind, catch it in my hand, put it in a bottle, and present it to my wife. We would call that a futile exercise, wouldn't we? Like, you can't catch the wind. And so he's going to use vanity that way, as a striving after the wind. Another way he's going to use this word is in saying that something is fleeting. And this is the phrase he'll use of passes, something passes like a shadow. And he uses this to talk about the length of our lives, that our lives are really short. In Ecclesiastes 6:12, he says, "For who knows what is good for man while he lives the few days of his vain life?" Aren't you encouraged this morning? "Which he passes like a shadow." It's the same idea that James in the New Testament, in James 4:14 has. He says, "What is your life? For you are a mist that appears for a little time and then vanishes." And so if I had one of those cleaning bottles up here, what Solomon would say, what James would say is, here's your life. A little spray, gone, right? So he's going to use the word vanity to describe how fleeting everything is. And then a third way that he'll use vanity that was a bit of a revelation for me, because I didn't really see this one before I got deeper into the book. He uses it to describe something that is perplexing. Something that is obscure, dark, hard, or difficult to understand. And keep in mind, Solomon was called the wisest man that ever lived. Yet, as he looks at things in life, he makes this statement in Ecclesiastes 8:17. He says, "Then I saw all the work of God, that man cannot find out the work that is done under the sun. However much man may toil in seeking, he will not find it out. Even though a wise man claims to know, he cannot find it out." So when you turn on the news today and someone says, here's how everything's going to go, they're wrong. They're wrong. Nobody knows. And so he's going to say it's a vain enterprise to try to understand everything God does on earth. And so hopefully this gives you an introduction of this word. We're going to talk about it a lot. But another question you might get is, what are the differences between Proverbs and Ecclesiastes? Same author, both wisdom literature. Well, this is important to remember. As it says in the NIV Life Application Study Bible, The book of Proverbs emphasizes how life would go if everyone acted fairly. Wouldn't that be great? Ecclesiastes explains what usually happens in our sinful and imperfect world. So there's going to be moments where we're reading this and you just want to tear your hair out because all you're thinking is, that's not fair. And that's kind of Solomon's point. In a world twisted by sin, in our lives that have been twisted by sin, many things in this life are not fair. Like the righteous die young sometimes, the wicked live on sometimes, and so we're going to see this a lot. And what Solomon is doing in Ecclesiastes is he's saying, how do we live with wisdom in a world twisted by sin? And so let's get into the verses. We're going to start in verses 1 and 2 with this. Solomon's battle with vanity. Solomon's battle with vanity. Look at verse 1. The words of the preacher, the son of David, king in Jerusalem. Vanity of vanities, says the preacher. Vanity of vanities. All is vanity. This author, Solomon, refers to himself as the preacher. The Hebrew word there is koheleth, and the simple definition for that word is the leader or speaker of the assembly. So what Solomon is wanting us to picture here is he's like somebody standing up in front of an assembly, a congregation. That's where we get the word church. The word church in the New Testament is ecclesia, Ecclesiastes, right? And he's standing in front of everyone, at his time the nation of Israel, but really inviting all of us, and he's saying, listen, let me tell you how things go in life. That's kind of the picture he wants to give us in this book. And maybe you're asking the question, how do we know that Solomon wrote this? Great question. I'd love to share how we know. So it says, the son of David, king in Jerusalem. Then if you look at verse 12, it says that this person was the king over Israel in Jerusalem. And that's a really important detail, because there were only 3 kings of Israel over the united kingdom of the northern kingdom of Israel, the southern kingdom of Judah. There was only 3 kings who ruled over both of those before they split. Saul, David, and Solomon. And only David and Solomon ruled over those kingdoms from Jerusalem. And so that narrows it down more. And then only one of those 2 was the son of David. It wasn't David, it was Solomon. So we know that this is Solomon speaking. And then when we go through the book, we get many little details that line up with Solomon's life. And so here's the point I would make. If you want to understand this book, you got to understand a little bit more about Solomon. What do we know about Solomon? What we know is he had everything you could want in this life. He was the son of the greatest king that ever ruled in Israel. He was the son of David. Solomon, when he was just a young boy, God showed up to him and said, hey, whatever you ask me for in prayer, for one thing ask, and I will give it to you. And maybe you know the story, 1 Kings 3. It's an awesome chapter. Solomon, he prayed for wisdom. He said, how can anybody rule this people without wisdom and discernment? And that pleased the Lord. And the Lord said, I'm going to make you more wise than anyone who ever lived, before you or after you, other than Christ, of course. And I'm going to give you discernment and judgment, but I'm also, Solomon, going to give you more than that. I'm going to give you wealth and honor. And that's what the Lord did. Solomon was Buffett-like rich, really rich, had anything you could want, possessions, money. Solomon had so much wisdom that people would travel to go hear him speak. Solomon was a writer of scripture. He wrote Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, Song of Songs, Psalm 72, Psalm 127, so he is still in our Bibles today. Solomon built houses, he built vineyards, he built gardens. Solomon built the temple of the Lord and his own house. Solomon had male and female employees or servants to do his bidding at every turn. And in terms of having the things that the world desires, Solomon literally had 1,000 women. And someone mentioned to me one time about that. They said, Billy, that kind of makes my skin crawl. And it should. Okay, it should. That was way outside of God's will. And Solomon paid the price for that. It led him into idolatry, and it led him into the consequences of sin. But even though the Lord disciplined Solomon, he showed a lot of grace to Solomon. Solomon says this about himself in Ecclesiastes 2, 9, and 10. You'll see this on the screen. So I became great and surpassed all who were before me in Jerusalem. And whatever my eyes desired, I did not keep from them. Think about that statement. Whatever my eyes desired, I took. I kept my heart from no pleasure. So this is the man who's writing this book. It's not somebody who wishes they had everything. It's somebody who literally had everything. And despite all that, despite all of his prestige and power and possessions, what does he say? Well, how does he start his book? Look at verse 2. Vanity of vanities. Vanity of vanities. All is vanity. Now, if my counting is correct here, that's 5 of the first 9 words in English there are the word vanity. I believe it's 5 of the first 8 words in the Hebrew. This is a man who's looking out on everything he's built, everything he's done. And from a worldly perspective, if you're not including God in the picture, if he's looking for these things to satisfy him, he's just crying out, empty, 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 empty. Meaningless, 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 meaningless. This is a man who's saying there's got to be more than this. It reminds me of something that the famous comedian Jim Carrey said. Maybe you've heard of Jim Carrey. He said this. I've often said that I wish people could realize all their dreams and wealth and fame so that they could see that it is not where you'll find your sense of completion. And that's really going to be the message of this book. Listen, God has given us so many things to enjoy. And in 2 Timothy 6, the Bible even says God has given us richly of all to enjoy. So this is not a book, and this is not a message saying, don't be thankful for your house. Don't love getting in that car you worked hard to buy. Don't not be thrilled, or be thrilled when you get that promotion or your income goes up. And we could go down the list. When your family's doing well, be happy about that. These things aren't bad in and of themselves, but what Solomon is going to challenge us with is, if you think that these things are going to lead you to feel fulfilled, you're going to find your sense of completion in these things without God at the center, without Christ at the center, you're going to end up where he did. You're going to end up saying, everything's meaningless. This is all empty. I don't feel fulfilled. And he's going to start to unpack that now in verses 3 through 11. The vanity of my life and legacy without God. The vanity of my life and legacy without God. Look at verse 3. What does man gain by all the toil at which he toils under the sun? A generation goes and a generation comes, but the earth remains forever. The sun rises and the sun goes down and hastens to the place where it rises. The wind blows to the south and goes around to the north. Around and around goes the wind. And on its circuits the wind returns. All streams run to the sea, but the sea is not full. To the place where the streams flow, there they flow again. All things are full of weariness. A man cannot utter it. The eye is not satisfied with seeing, nor the ear filled with hearing. What has been is what will be, and what has been done is what will be done. And there is nothing new under the sun. Is there a thing of which it is said, see, this is new? It has been already in the ages before us. There is no remembrance of former things, nor will there be any remembrance of later things yet to be among those who come after. And so Solomon makes this statement in verse 3, where he is basically holding up all of life. He's holding up all of life. And keep in mind, God has given this guy more wisdom than any of us. He's just looking at all this. And he's asking the question, for all of our hustle and bustle, for all of our keeping up with the Joneses, for all of our rat racing, to make something of our life, our legacy, when you go to bed at night, what has really been gained? You ever had a work day where you're at work for 8 hours and you get home and you're trying to remember what you did, and you're like, what did I get done today? Did I actually accomplish anything today? I'm sure you've had those days. We've all had those days. And he's trying to get us to picture, the person who wakes up on Wall Street, gets their coffee at 5 a.m., goes into the marketplace, works as hard as they can, and does that for 40 years, and gets to the end, and he's saying, what is really gained by all of this? He's looking down at how man just runs around like little ants and does all these things. And he's going to compare that rat race to nature. And so you'll see this word or this phrase, round and round, that he keeps using that phrase in these verses as he describes nature, talking about the sun going up then down, the water going in and out, the wind going from the north to the south, and round and round and round and round it goes. And he's comparing that to our rat racing without God at the center. And what he essentially sees in verse 8 when he examines all of it is really just all things are full of weariness. He said, it just makes me tired. It just wears me out. You actually can see some reflections here. Maybe he's reflecting on Genesis 3:19 when Adam and Eve are cursed because of their sin. And God tells Adam, by the sweat of your brow, you will eat from cursed ground. Maybe he's reflecting on that, just the fact that for all of our work, what does it really accomplish? He's saying it ultimately just leads us to being tired. And our eyes are never satisfied with seeing. Our ears are never satisfied with hearing. And then in verse 9, he's not just challenging how life works. He begins to challenge the idea that you and I can leave some great legacy for people someday. That idea of building our own kingdom to last. He really challenges that. He says, what has been is what will be. What has been done is what will be done. There's nothing new under the sun. Is there a thing of which it is said, see, this is new? It has been already in the ages before us. What he is saying is essentially everything that happens today, even if people shout, this is so new, he's saying it's really not new. The discovery of America seemed new. The landing on the moon, except for some of you conspiracy theorists, you try to deny that, but not for you, but we'll say the landing on the moon seemed new. Or, discovering America, landing on the moon, these are different, these are new, right? And he's saying, no, they're kind of the same thing. Like something new was discovered, and this has just continued on and on and on. And so he's saying, there's really nothing new that's happening. And he says in verse 11, there is no remembrance of former things, nor will there be any remembrance of later things yet to be among those who come after. Part of the reason he says that people think there are new things, but there's not, is because generations come and go, and people grow up. And have you noticed how young people don't always love history? Anybody else notice that? So they might not know everything that happened. And so they see something and it looks new, but Solomon's saying, no, it's not new. And if you knew history, you'd know it's not new. That's the point he's making. And man, if you're not already feeling depressed, this one might depress you, what I'm about to say. So I'm sorry about that. There is hope. There is hope coming. In about 200 years, I think what Solomon's saying is in about, let's say 200 years, everything, including us and everything we have, will probably be in a trash heap somewhere. Our bodies will be in the ground. Maybe a few houses will be around, but they'll be beat up. That car that you're emotionally attached to won't be working. And we feel this already, don't we? Like in our bodies. I'm 35, and if I sleep wrong, my neck hurts. And if that's happening to me, I know it's happening to you. Maybe you got up this morning, you took a drink of coffee, and your arm hurts, and you don't even know why your arm hurts. Like our bodies are breaking down, and we feel it. We kind of just feel all of this life just passing away. We know what he's saying is true. That if we think we're going to build some great legacy, that everybody's going to be celebrating centuries later, he's saying you're kidding yourself. That's a vain enterprise. That's not going to happen. It's futile. One of the reasons I think this book is so important is because it reminds us that God's word and Jesus Christ's message is not just for the poor, not just for those who don't have many resources, it's for those who have resources. those who've attained some measure of worldly success. Maybe you set a goal and you achieved that goal. And Solomon is preaching to that person, and he's saying, listen, maybe you feel like me. You have everything, but you have nothing. And this book has been driving people in that spot. Don't you think there's people in America in that spot? To Christ for years. I was just reading about people who have come to Christ out of a life of success. And I came across this guy named Steve McQueen. There's a woman named Esther O'Reilly. She said this about Steve McQueen. They said that he could act with the back of his head. No fancy dialogue or frills required. His mere presence loomed larger than life in every shot. Put him next to some of the finest actors in the business, and he would undercut every one of them simply by being in the frame. His piercingly distinctive blue eyes were set in a rough-hewn, unconventionally handsome face that rarely betrayed strong emotion. His smallest physical gesture was precisely calculated and gracefully executed. You couldn't best him. You couldn't buy him. You couldn't touch him. He was the king of cool. He was Steve McQueen. Steve McQueen grew up in a troubled home. His mother was an alcoholic involved with many men, and his father was a stunt pilot who left his family early and left the mother on her own. And all this left Steve McQueen in trouble, so he was sent to live with his grandparents. And it was living with his grandparents that he developed this love of racing and stunts. But McQueen was a rebel. He got arrested many times. He got sent away from his grandparents until eventually he joined the Marines, where he showed a great deal of courage and valor, but lost none of his rebellious streak. When he got home, he decided that he would try his hand in acting, and that's really where McQueen found his gift. His career began to take off because he had this ability in action scenes to remain totally cool. And so he became one of the highest paid stars of his generation. And all along the way, his motto was, I come first, I'm number one. There was no room for God there. And this mentality led McQueen to burn through drugs, marriages. He had a slew of affairs. And ultimately, by the end of the 1970s, for all of his success, his health was starting to fail. And he felt totally empty. Totally unfulfilled. You could picture him saying what Solomon said, vanity of vanities. When he saw his doctor suggested that McQueen go live in a smaller town. And so he moved into a smaller town. He met his third wife, Barbara, there, lived in an airport hangar with his motorcycle collection. That's kind of cool. But while he was living there, God started to intervene. McQueen met a man who just happened to be a Christian named Sammy Mason. And Sammy Mason was his flight instructor. And so they would be up in the air, nowhere to go, on these long flights. And McQueen, because he was in such a vulnerable place, would ask Sammy about the meaning of life. And one day, Sammy Mason just said to McQueen, listen, the meaning of life is in one name, Jesus Christ. And because of their relationship and the favor that Sammy Mason had with Steve McQueen, McQueen came to Sammy Mason's church. And the pastor at that church, his name was Leonard DeWitt. He talked about how he would just see this obscure man sitting in the back of the balcony, not introducing himself for several months, just going to church there. And it was Steve McQueen. And one day he asked to meet with the pastor. And so Leonard DeWitt is sitting with this movie star, and he looks at him, and I could totally see myself doing this. He says, McQueen, I've got just one question for you. And McQueen cut him off, and he smiled, and he said, I know what you're going to ask me. Have I accepted Christ? Am I a born-again Christian? He said, Pastor DeWitt, when you invited us to pray and embrace Christ, I did. So yes, I have become a born-again Christian. And Sammy Mason describes those later years of McQueen's life as he's never seen a spiritual transformation like this. McQueen didn't have all the Hollywood money, fame, all that stuff. His health was breaking down. He didn't have everything you want in this life, but he was so much happier now. He had joy, he had peace, and it radiated to the people around him in his life. Sadly, in those years, it wasn't long until he developed an incurable form of cancer. And after he became a Christian, a person he always wanted to meet was Billy Graham. And so Billy Graham came to see Steve McQueen, and McQueen had misplaced his Bible, so Billy Graham said, here's mine. Billy Graham gave McQueen his Bible, and 4 days later, when Steve passed away, he was found with the Bible just opened on his chest, and it was open to his favorite verse, John 3:16. For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whoever believes in him shall not perish but have eternal life. And that is the person that this book is for. None of us might be Steve McQueen. But if you're in a place this morning, you're saying, Billy, I've tried everything. I've tried everything to fill my soul, my heart, but there's a God-shaped hole there. I've tried money, I've tried sex, I've tried every form of pleasure. I've tried making my family perfect, building my career, and it's all empty to me. And this book is for you. And here's what not just Ecclesiastes, but the Bible teaches us. That there is meaning to be found. That about 1,000 years after Solomon, God actually did do a new thing under the sun. He came in the flesh in the form of Jesus Christ and died on the cross to actually create meaning and restore meaning to all of the work that we do. And if you would give your life to him and put Jesus at the center, now you can live a life of meaning and value. And you don't have to go through everything Steve McQueen did to get there. You can make that decision now. But this isn't just about those of you who have not embraced Christ. I know many of you here have. I'm friends with you. And I've found in my own life, when it comes to material things, that because we are living sacrifices, we have this tendency to crawl off the altar, don't we? And to start putting things in the place of Christ. And to suddenly look to things in our life to find our sense of completion and fulfillment and identity. And what this series needs to be for us is reminding ourselves week after week that those things, we can enjoy them, but they'll never satisfy our soul. And here's the good news. If you've got that thing in the back of your head, most of us probably do right now, you're saying, boy, I don't always love to bring this thing to God. I kind of like to build my kingdom when it comes to this. Bring it to him this morning.